I'm Barbara Nitke, and I'm a photographer.
Hello and welcome to Art, the podcast where we get up close and personal as we get to know women from around the world of visual arts. I'm Chris Stafford and this is Season 3, Episode 19. My guest this week is the American photographer Barbara Nitke, whose life has taken her from hardcore porn sets to the BDSM world and to the fashion world as her art evolves. She's as ambitious as ever, expanding her many talents to currently producing her own movie, American Ecstasy, which is projected to begin filming in 2026. As a vibrant septuagenarian, Barbara has widened her aperture across her career that began in the porn theatres of the 80s, where she was tasked to screen more than 100 films, to the high art of the fashion industry in the reality TV show Project Runway, which she shot for 18 seasons. Barbara was born in Lynchburg, Virginia in 1950, the eldest of 3 children to Eloise Vicky Smiley Gregory, a meteorologist who worked for 30 years at the National Weather Service, and Paul Gervais Gregory Jr., a World War II veteran and air traffic controller. Barbara has a younger brother, Gary Gregory, who's a software developer, and her sister, Mary Jane Gregory, who's a glass artist. She describes her childhood as unhappy and rebellious, constantly seeking her own independence. It was 1967 before her father disclosed an earlier marriage to the family, and in 1987 she discovered that the author and sex researcher Cher Hite was her half-sister. Barbara's family moved across the country when she was a child, from Virginia to Alaska, which meant she attended a variety of schools. But for college, Barbara made her way to New York to study business, literature, and writing at Baruch College, and then photography at the International Center for Photography and School of Visual Arts. In her late 20s, she started photographing professionally, and in 1982, she says she found her subject on a porn set when she was given full access to be creative. Her first marriage to Herb Nitke lasted 13 years and gave her opportunities to develop her photographic skills in an unlikely world. Among her many credits are Hustlers 2019, Monsterland 2020, The Equalizer 2021, The Gilded Age in 2023, Smile in 2024, and Project Runway, of which she shot 225 episodes from 2004 to 2021. Barbara's work has been exhibited internationally at venues including Storage APT, New York, the Hartner Gallery at University of Rochester, One-Eyed Jack's Gallery in Brighton, England, and Barristers in New Orleans. She's included in the permanent collections of the Kinsey Institute, the Finnish Museum of Photography, the Leslie Lohman Museum, and others. Her images have been the subject of articles in numerous venues, including Office Magazine, Forbes, Dazed, Slate, Vice, Harper's Magazine, and the New York Times. Barbara is married to Kenneth Wyburn, an Army veteran, and the couple divide their time between New York City and Ohio. Barbara, welcome to the podcast. I understand this is your debut on a podcast, so I feel honored to be the first host for you on a podcast. Welcome. How does it feel?
Thank you. I'm a nervous wreck, Chris.
No, you can't be. This is just you and I sitting by the fire, having an adult beverage and talking about your life and career.
I love that. I love the fireside chat idea. That's great.
You like that?
I like it.
Looking at your career, Barbara, where do I start? There is so much there, Barbara. You've had such an interesting career. Do you pinch yourself sometimes when you think back at what you've achieved?
I do. Actually, I feel so fortunate to have had the life I've had so far. And I have a good 20, 30 more years to go. And I just hope it keeps on being as interesting as it's been.
Do you have a bucket list now? Even, at this point in your career, shall we say you're 3/4 of a way through your career. Would that be fair?
That would be fair. I'm 74. I'm planning to live to be 100. So yeah, my bucket list. Bucket list. That's hard. Well, I want to produce a movie. So certainly that's on my bucket list. And I want to place my body of artwork somewhere. And I've got, a long time left to do it in, but yeah, I'd like that. And I'd like to live in a country that I can respect. That's very high up on my bucket list right now.
Because right now you're commuting, you told me, between New York and Ohio. That's a little hop and a skip.
Well, yes, I'm commuting between New York and Ohio because my husband lives in Ohio and I live in New York in Harlem. But I mean, the situation of the world, I'm just disturbed about this country, America, at the moment.
So do you see yourself living in another country?
I don't know. I'm seriously thinking about it, but it's not that easy to do either.
How much of your time is working now compared to what it was, say, 20 years ago?
Wow, that is a good question. I have freelanced really all my life. And as a freelancer, you kind of go up and down. 20 years ago, I was really focused all the time on doing my artwork and not a lot on paying the rent type of work. So one of my challenges back then was to try to get that in balance, but I was in one way or another working all the time. Over the years, the balance changed to where I had to really think about paying the rent and getting out of debt, which I did. So that changed the balance. But let's see. God, I work all the time. The last couple of years, I got married 2 years ago to the most beautiful man in the world. And I'm working less. I'm working less now, which is great, but I'm not ready by any means to retire. Ken is retired. I'm trying to work all the time. So I guess that's the current balancing act.
I want to talk about what's on your to-do list, Barbara, before we go back and look at your past achievements and the journey that you took, which is colourful to say the least, and there'll be lots to talk about there. But let's talk about what you want to do now, because I think we are in the present. You seem to have a lot on your to-do list, but some really important goals too. In the world of fine arts, you want to write this movie, want to write the script yourself. Having a background in film production as well, I'm sure helps you. But how do you see yourself carving that out as a producer, the director, DP? Explain what that project is, first of all, and then how you see your role evolving in it.
Well, when COVID happened, so what is that, 5 years ago, I think? So 5 years ago, I had just gotten this idea from a friend of mine at HBO to write the script for a television show, for like a series, because HBO had produced The Deuce. And I spent a lot of time in the adult film industry as a photographer and married to a producer also. So I know that world. And my friend Christy and I thought, I'd like a natural to write a pilot script. And, I'll just sell it and HBO will produce it. How hard will that be? So it took me, I don't know, years and years of rewriting to finally get the pilot to where I wanted it. And now, as of about a year ago, I realized the television industry had changed while I was working on this thing. So I shifted about a year ago now I want to make a feature film out of that same material. I have a finished script. I have a very interesting director from Europe who I'm working with. And we're thinking about making it as a very low budget film where we could have a lot of control over it. So ideally, I mean, I've written the script, but I'd like to produce and have him direct that, but none of that is finalized yet. So, hopefully we'll be able to pull it off. I would just love to be able to pull this off. It would be so great.
Why does it mean so much to you? What's so special about this?
Boy, I wish I knew, Chris, because in 1982, I mean, I know we're going to tell the whole story, but in 1982, I found a subject that I was really interested in and that was going to start my career, in my opinion. I was working on a porn set, and I was in the makeup room of nasty girls, and I had full access to everybody. I was just back there, part of the crew with my camera. And it just hit me all at once. Oh my God, this is my subject. I have found my subject. And all these years later, so what is this? 40 years later, I still haven't completed that journey with that subject. And I don't know. I feel like there's a statement that I'm supposed to make. I don't want to make it sound too metaphysical, but I just feel like there's a story I'm supposed to tell, and I'm still trying to tell it. So yeah, it just means a lot to me.
I did read somewhere that your focus has always remained consistent in that you always intend to have an intimate connection with your subject matter. And given your choice where you feel you identify the most in the world of adult porn, I'm wondering what that connection means. Why did it resonate so strongly with you and you became so passionate about that subject? Maybe being a voice for those that otherwise couldn't put a voice to what they were doing.
I don't know. I wish I knew. 30 years of therapy, and I cannot answer that question. I don't know. That's my subject. I read a book years ago called Dispatches. It was written by Michael Hare, and he was 26 when he wrote the book. And the book was source material for the movie Apocalypse Now, as it turned out. But Michael Hare talked about what it was like in a very raw way, the book kind of very rough and raw written. He talked about what it was like being there with the soldiers as a war correspondent in Vietnam. I related to it. I read that book, I don't know how many times, because that was I just related to it. Like, that's who I am, I think, in the porn world. But I don't want to overstate my case, Yeah, I don't know. I just, like one of the things that Michael Harris said was, he said, well, here, he's with I forget the exact wording, but he's with all these soldiers. They're in a battlefield. He's like, well, they know why they're here. They're here to kill people. That is why they're here. They got drafted. They're here. Their job is to kill people. But what am I doing here? I'm writing about it. Like he knew he was part of it. Like, he wasn't killing anybody, but he was just as much a part of it. And that was his role. And I wish I could say it as well as he did. But that always resonated with me. And I feel, that kind of empathy with my subject. I have to feel that, or I don't want to be there. I feel it on it's like less pronounced. Let's say if I'm on a film set or doing a portrait shoot or something, it's not doesn't resonate as deeply. But I'm still very much relating to the person in front of the camera.
And you said that you want to erase those boundaries between these sex workers, porn stars, and these people that have become your subjects through life.
Yeah.
And show a deeper connection with them, to humanize them in some way. Do you feel that you have kind of a responsibility because you're the one holding the camera?
Yes. I think that there's an enormous responsibility there. Yes, I realized that really early on. A lot of it is in the edit, Chris, and I'm sure you know this, but as a photographer, you shoot a bunch of pictures of someone, of a scene, of whatever it is. The image that you choose, you can choose different ways of what you're going to show. And I think there's a huge responsibility there. I mean, yeah, part of it is when you're framing it, part of it is in the framing before you take the picture. Part of it is in the planning when you walk in and say, you're going to have a point of view of what you want to shoot. That's part of it. And you can choose not to shoot a certain picture, whether to shoot it, whether to push the shutter or not. But in the end, when you look in the edit, that's when it always hits me. It's, God, I could make this person look really ugly, or I could make them look great, And I always want to make people look great. Yeah, I don't feel a huge separation between different people. I find different people fascinating. I love meeting different people, So, yeah, I guess I want to show that. I think sex work is really important in our society. And I don't think we give it the credit that it deserves, or certainly we don't give it the people who do it any credit. Yes, I'd like to right that wrong.
How much editorial control do you have, or do you insist on having when you're on a shoot?
Well, on my shoots, I have the control.
That's for a still set, right? Not a film set.
Yeah. If I'm hired to work on a film set, I don't even own those pictures. So there's a difference. Like if I get hired to work on Project Runway, which I worked on for years, producers own that work and then they have the control. So I do have to be more careful what I shoot. If it's one of my shoots, I know I'm the one that's going to edit at the end. But what I've always done is I let the people I'm photographing for my own artwork, my own shoots, I always have them look at the pictures, and I will not use anything that they don't like, even though they've signed a model release and I could use it. I don't. I mean, I don't want that energy on it. I want them to like the picture that I'm using.
Let's go back and start this journey where you began. You were born in Lynchburg, Virginia in 1950. Your parents, interestingly, your mother was a meteorologist, Eloise, and your father, Paul, World War II vet and their traffic controller. I'd imagine that was a very compatible marriage because, their professions complemented one another.
Oh, my God. It's so funny you said that. They were the least compatible people.
You mean they couldn't talk about the weather and the flying?
Oh, my God. That's hysterical. You know what? You're right. On the surface, it sounds like they'd be a good couple. They met after World War II at the airport in Lynchburg. My dad had just gotten back from the war, and he had been trained as an air traffic controller there, but he was from the Midwest. And he landed up in Lynchburg, Virginia. For some reason, he hated Southerners. He always thought that they were completely, what's the word I want to say? I can't think of the word, but, like they don't say what they mean. It's manners, but Southern manners. So, but anyway, my dad was an alcoholic. And I think that he suffered from PTSD, but World War II, like people didn't know that, which is kind of sad. My dad had been in Normandy, actually. So he had really witnessed a lot of horrible stuff in World War II and came back and no way to deal with it. And so he was an alcoholic. My mother didn't know how to really handle that. They fought all the time. Actually, I have to say, though, she pretty much held the family together. She had been a meteorologist, and she quit work to have 3 kids, and then she went back to work. So she did 30 years total. So I had a working mom, and I think that was a good role model. It was difficult because they were so badly matched. Look, she probably only had one choice, which was to leave because of his alcoholism. And she couldn't do that because she was a good Southern girl, and it would be shameful if she got divorced, and she would have to go home to her family in disgrace. So she stayed in the marriage. I think it was a formative thing for me because I think I was the oldest and both parents confided in me. And I think that taught me empathy or how to see both sides of a situation. But they were just so unhappy. And I think that weighed on me, as a kid. But you know what? You're right, though, because when you think, oh, an airport romance, they met at the airport, it does sound pretty cool.
What was your relationship like with either of them?
I was close to both of them. I had a weird role in the family, I guess. I helped my mom out a lot around the house because, she was working and raising kids and having an alcoholic father. But then my father would be morose and have no one to talk to, so I would sit and talk to him. So I was close to both of them in a way. And I had this family role of being like the caretaker because I was the oldest, but I was also very rebellious and I was very unhappy. So, and I probably wanted more independence at a younger age than my mother thought I should have. So that caused a lot of fights. So, I had a weird role in the family, and I left as soon as I got out of high school. I moved out. But later in life, I was very close to my mom. So I guess things come full circle. My dad died just after I moved out. Actually, he died. He had a cerebral hemorrhage. No doubt from the alcohol, I would guess. But yeah, he died very suddenly.
How about grandparents? Did you have a relationship with any of them?
No, because we moved around a lot. So my dad was not close to his family in Missouri at all. And we had moved away from Lynchburg where my mother had a huge family. So yeah, no grandparents.
And you, as you say, you did move around quite a lot. You went from Virginia to Alaska. And was that because of your father's work?
Yeah, when you're an air traffic control operator, it's very similar to like an Army background. The way that they get promoted is by they bid on jobs in other cities. So I was born in Lynchburg. Then we moved to Binghamton, New York, where my brother was born. Then we went to Norfolk, Virginia, where my sister was born. And then we went to Anchorage, Alaska, and then King Salmon, Alaska. And then when I was going into 11th grade, we moved back to Virginia. We moved to Arlington. I actually went from a high school. My high school in Alaska had 30 people in it, and that was from 9th to 12th grade, 30 people total. I went to Wakefield High School in Arlington, Virginia with 3,000 people. It was culture shock, total.
Yes. How did you cope with that? I mean, it could be overwhelming. How did you cope?
Well, it was. Yeah, it was. But I think all the moving around that we had done probably helped me. I mean, I think I'm pretty adaptable because of all that moving around. But in Alaska, in my high school there, with the 30 people, so you were like you knew everybody, and then to go to 3,000, I didn't know anybody, But when I was in Alaska, the high school there, I was a cheerleader, believe it or not, because there were 30 people. So if you were a girl, you were a cheerleader. If you were a guy, you were on the basketball team. And our basketball team was the worst in the league. And we traveled to play other schools. And the way we got there was by airplane. I don't know if you know much about Alaska, but the only way you get around is by little airplanes. They're like taxi cabs. So we would fly to these different towns to play the other team, the basketball team. And And we were the worst because our school, we didn't have a gymnasium. We had our basketball court was outdoors and it was only like half size, and you're in Alaska in the winter, right? So the guys didn't get much of a chance to practice. But we had so much fun going to all these towns and hanging out with the kids there. And, we would get caught smoking and everything. And it was a blast. So, that was a world that I knew and loved. So, yeah, going to a big city like Arlington, that was a big deal. But I obviously adapted because I landed up in New York.
Toughened you up.
I think it did. I think all of it did. Yeah.
What kind of a student were you, Barbara?
I was a good student. School came easy to me. I pretty much A's and B's, I think. I didn't have to work hard at it.
Did you have a disciplined home life? I wondered if that helped in school. Were you a very disciplined child?
No. Well, I was given a lot of responsibility very young, so maybe, I don't know, I can get things done. Like if I know there's a test tomorrow, I can cram, back then I would cram for it and do it. I didn't consider myself a scholar in any way. It's just that I didn't have plans to go to college or anything like that.
What subjects were you interested in?
Boy, that's a good question. I don't even know. What subjects was I interested in? I don't know. I liked reading a lot when I was a kid. I read a lot, so I probably liked English, probably. I know I liked to read a lot. I was very much, when I was a kid, I was very much into being independent and making my own money. So I had after-school jobs from the age of 12 on. When I was 12, I did a lot of babysitting. And then I got a job after school in summers. I was like a housekeeper for these people. They had a young couple that had 3 kids and they had an airplane company. So they were pretty overwhelmed. And I had all kinds of after school jobs. I think I was more interested than that in, making money after school than I was in the school, to be honest.
Were you, then as the oldest of the 3, were you very involved with your brother and sister? Did you hang out together, or were you too independent and wanted to go your own way? How did you integrate, and how did they regard you?
I wish we had been closer as kids. We were not. I wish we had been. I think they regarded me as bossy,
And that's the role of the older sister,
yeah, I know.
Isn't it?
I know. And I think to this day, they blame me for all kinds of stuff. I don't know. I wish we had, it'd be nice if we had been closer. That is a regret. I'm sorry that we weren't closer. Yeah.
Interestingly, you had an older half-sister.
Yes.
Same dad, to someone who, for those listeners who have a long memory, may have heard of Cher Haidt, who was the author and sex researcher of the Haidt Report. Now, I remember that.
Do you?
I do. So that resonated with me when I read that. And so I'm wondering where she fitted into your life in the sibling clan.
We didn't know about her. It was a major blow up within the family. I think it was after we moved back to Arlington. So I would have been around 15, 16. When my Cher tracked down my father. He had abandoned her, to be honest. And he didn't tell my mother he had been married before. And that was just a huge, huge blow up in the family. And my father, I remember he wanted to go and see Cher, and then my mother was really against it, and he ended up not going, which was awful. So I never knew who she was. I just knew there was someone who existed who was a girl that he had from an earlier marriage. I found out in 1987. There was an article in Newsweek magazine about Cher's, I think it was her 3rd book, And I knew the height report, of course, And so she had come out with a new book, and I bought the Newsweek magazine, and I was reading the article. And in that book, Cher's research showed that 70% of American women were cheating on their husbands.
70%?
Yes, it went over like a lead balloon. Everyone was very upset. So I was reading the article, and there was a sidebar that said, something about Cher's stepfather, Raymond Height, but her real father was Paul Gregory. And I went, Paul Gregory? You have to be kidding me. That's my dad. That was my maiden name. I could not believe it. And because I knew I had this half sister who was, older. I was able to do this. I called Newsweek magazine. They put me in touch somehow with the writer of that article. And that writer, I guess, I forget how, contacted Cher, I guess, to see if she would talk to me or whatever. And we had a wonderful conversation. And then Cher left the country right after that. And then I didn't see her again until 2010, I think, maybe. I saw her a couple times in London. She had moved over there, and I was in London a couple of times for work, and I was able to get together with her, and it was just delightful. There's just so much to say there, and I can't believe how forgotten she is. It's wrong. They made a movie about her called The Disappearance of Cher Height. That was a documentary that premiered at Sundance a couple of years ago.
Of course, that nuance is not something that would be unnoticed by those who are paying attention to this, that she was a sex researcher and you worked in the porn industry.
I know. Gotta be my dad's side of the family. Gotta be.
Definitely on that side of the family. It's interesting. I'd imagine would have led to some interesting conversations at dinner with her, wouldn't it?
It did. I mean, we really had a delightful time getting together. Yeah, because, we both talked about our work and the fact that we both do the work we do. So when I met Cher, was sick. She had, I thought it was Parkinson's at the time, but it was actually a neurological disorder that eventually killed her. She died, I think, 4 years ago, maybe 5. But I met her for the first time in person in a restaurant in London, and I had been told that she had Parkinson's. So I was in the restaurant, and in walks this woman, still looking glamorous, flanked by 3 guys who were practically carrying her in the restaurant. And clearly, I mean, they all just loved her. It was amazing. They just were adoring. And I always called them the Cher entourage. But she had her husband, Paul, who's a lovely guy, her ex-lover, Paolo, another lovely guy, and then this guy, Bill, who was writing her biography, I guess, at the time. And I got together with them a couple of times without Cher, too. They're just all lovely. But yeah, I wish I had known Cher as we were growing up. That would have been really nice.
Did your siblings feel the same way toward her? Were you all getting closer to her when you could?
My sister definitely. My brother not at all. Just never wanted anything to do with her. I'm not sure why. My brother's very conservative. My sister's an artist, and she lives in Finland, and I guess more open-minded, but also maybe just because we're all the girls,
Yeah. Girls stuck together. I'm glad you mentioned Mary Jane, or Janie as you call her, because, as you say, she was a glass artist. So where did that come from, if in terms of the family's artistic bent, so to speak?
No idea, Chris. No clue. I don't think there are any artists in the family outside of me and Janie. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, although my mother was always very creative. She was always redecorating the house and everything. So maybe just nobody in our line was encouraged in that direction. I don't know. My brother's kind of a scientist, which I think is a bit related to art, too. He's a computer scientist.
Interestingly, your sister is a glass artist and you've broken glass ceilings all your life.
Oh, that's great. I'll have to share that with her. She'll love that.
When did you first pick up a camera, though? I'm interested in how influential your parents may or may not have been in terms of steering you towards your career choice.
Well, I never knew who I was in the world when I was a kid. I just had no idea of my identity at all. But as a young adult, I wanted to be a writer. And I took a lot of writing classes. I thought I was going to tell interesting stories about all the fascinating people that I was surrounded by. As I married a man when I was 20. I hooked up with a guy who was 55, and his name was Barbara Nitke, and he was like a gambler, promoter, hustler kind of a guy. And so we were surrounded by all of these amazing people. I mean, really colorful people. And I wanted to write about them. I wanted to write short stories. So I was taking all these writing classes, and I do not like the process of writing at all. I hate sitting in front of a frigging piece of paper. And I picked up a camera. I don't know how. Somebody gave me one or lent me one or something. And it was just love immediately, but I was in my late 20s by then. And then I just started, really studying photography because I realized that's what I wanted to be. But I think it's the same. It's the idea of storytelling, I guess, or fascination with people, or both.
You went to the International School of Photography in New York and the School of Visual Arts as well.
I did.
What year would that have been, and was that when you decided that photography was the path to take?
Yeah, that would have been the late 70s. Yeah, the late 70s. And then in 1980, my husband at the time, Herb Nitke, was making a horror movie. There's a little story to that, but he was making a horror movie called The Prowler. And I was stuck in Cape May, New Jersey for 6 weeks while they were shooting that movie because I was there with him and I had my camera. So I was hanging out on the set with the director's wife. She was a photographer, and we were hanging out, and I had my camera and we were taking pictures. And I thought, this is fun. I like this. So that would be 80. So around probably 81 or so was when I really started to get more serious. And then in 1982, Herb decided to make a movie called Devil and Miss Jones Part 2. And I should backtrack to say that he made Devil and Miss Jones, the original, which was a very famous porn movie. He made that in 73 and made a lot of money and then gambled all that money away. And then, so he gambled all that money away. And then in around 79, a guy named Sean Cunningham came over to the house and said, I want to make a horror movie. You should finance it. And Herb could have raised the money to do it, but he chose not to. And that movie was Friday the 13th, which he turned down. So there's this whole checkered history there. But anyway, so then he decided to make Devil and Miss Jones Part 2 and come back, and he was coming back into the porn business with that movie. And I worked on the script of that movie with the writers because I had studied writing. And then I got the stills job on that set, Devil and Miss Jones Part 2. And it wasn't really that film. It was the second film, Nasty Girls, that the same director, I did a pretty good job on Devil and Miss Jones Part 2 as stills. So that director liked my work and liked my attitude on the set, I guess. So he hired me to work on his next movie, which was Nasty Girls. And that's the one when as I said, I really discovered my subject there. So yeah, that's how it happened. And I think that was probably really when I just started working my ass off to be the best photographer I could be, because I had found myself, Chris, I mean, after like a decade of I don't know who I am and stumbling around and being interested in different things. I took French lessons. I played tennis. I did all kinds, it was just, I couldn't find myself. So when I found my subject and I had the camera, that's when I really got serious. And I really wanted to be the best photographer that I ever could be.
With that, of course, not only comes the responsibility when you're behind the camera, but it also needs the trust of the subjects too. So it becomes a partnership in order for it to really make it work for everybody. There must have been a magical connection in some way for you, because this is not a subject that everyone would be drawn to. Let's be honest about this, Barbara. Not everybody's listening to this thinking, oh, I want to be a photographer. Not everybody wants to look at that. I mean, we've all seen porn movies, but not everybody wants to look at that as their subject matter when they go to work, right?
Yeah, it's true.
But you saw past that, and I can kind of understand it, because when I'm behind a camera, whether it be phone camera, still camera, I can be in places that I otherwise wouldn't be comfortable with. Like, I'm afraid of heights, but if I'm behind a camera or on a jig or something, I'm okay. I can see past. I mean, I'm so focused. Like, I know you are. As a photographer, you're so focused. You're just looking through the lens, right? You're just framing something.
Well, that's true. That's true.
It becomes like a little world of its own. It's only between you and the camera, the lens, and doing the job, right? And what you're focused on. It becomes very intimate no matter what the subject is. But what you're doing is going into a very intimate world.
Well, yeah, I know. I guess that does sound odd.
It doesn't sound odd to me.
Yeah.
I mean, every listener to themselves here. I think it requires a certain kind of approach, a mindset to do it and not be distracted by the fact, oh gosh, look what I'm photographing. No, I'm doing my job. And this is what I relate to in a way that I can bring out the art of my job, perhaps like no other. I mean, you're enormously successful. So something resonated with you, how you got into that mode and was not intimidated by it.
Well, I think a couple of things. First of all, I think you're absolutely, because so you understand that thing that the camera creates a separation.
Totally.
Yeah. And I don't know if everybody gets that, but it's really true. There's it's a protection almost, because you're looking.
Yes.
Yeah. You're not in it. You're looking at it,
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think part of my goal as a photographer is to break that down and be in it. So that's maybe part of the challenge to me. But as for how I was comfortable with the subject, I'll backtrack a little. When I had all kinds of jobs as a young adult. And one of them was I got a job when I was 20, I guess, 19 maybe. I had moved to New York and I got this job at a movie chain company. And the owner was Herb, who I ended up marrying, years later. But he went through all kinds of ups and downs. And in the early 70s, he discovered that he owned all these theaters that were in downtown cities in upstate New York, and nobody went downtown anymore at that time. Everybody had moved out to the suburbs, so there were all these big downtown theaters. Herb converted them to porn theaters and made a ton of money. And I was first working for him And then we started dating, and then we were living together. So through that whole period, I was around the porn world because he was playing porn movies in his theaters. So he could not stand porn movies, Chris. He thought they were incredibly stupid, which there was a case to be made for that. So I would be the one.
The irony of that just hit me in the face.
The irony of that, I know. He just thought they were really stupid, but they made a lot of money. So I would be the one that would get, and he had a business partner, Jimmy Boches, who was busy doing other stuff usually. So I was the one that would end up being sent to watch, just pre-screen the movies that he was going to exhibit in the theaters. So I must have seen like 100 porn movies before I ever got onto a set. And I would, back then, that was you had to go into a screening room, into a theater to watch a movie. So they had screening rooms, small theaters. So, I would go in to screen the movie for the guys, and I would bring a magazine to read while screening the movie. And because they were boring, I'll be honest. I don't think they were art. But, my job was just, is there enough sex scenes? Is there decent production value? Is the movie really at least an hour long? Can you hear the sound? Is it minimally acceptable? So, I was kind of desensitized by the time I ever got on a porn set and in person. But also because Herb produced the movie Devil and Miss Jones, he got arrested 3 times and charged with obscenity. And I saw what he went through and the mental anguish and all the expense of the lawyers and just all of that. Herb's business partner fled to Greece for a while because he was convinced he was going to jail. I mean, it was just, and really, from my point of view, it was absurd. Look, these movies are stupid. If you don't want to watch them, don't go to them. So I think I was completely desensitized to the movies themselves. And I guess I also felt that the government coming down against him was wrong on some level because I was, married to Herb. So when he was making Devil and Miss Jones part 2, and I had taken up photography, I just thought getting the stills job would be fun. I was over the sex part. Like, I hope that makes sense, or I thought I was. I thought I was over the sex part. First sex scene that I actually shot, it was amazing. I was like, oh my God. I've seen it, all these movies, and my heart fought on against in favor of pornography should be able to exist in my heart. But they're actually having sex in front of me, So I did feel that. But I got over it pretty quickly, and one does. Like, if anybody that ever worked will probably tell you the same thing. Like, the first day, it's like a big deal. And by the second day, it's like, yeah, we're going to work in the Coca-Cola factory tomorrow, It just becomes a job.
Is that title, porn movie censor, on your resume? I should put that on.
Yes. How did I not think of that? I love that. I'm going to do that.
Not everybody can say that. And I will say, in all my career, Barbara, you are the first porn censor I have ever interviewed.
Yeah, I see what you mean, though. Yeah.
Now, having heard this story, it makes everything else seem, crystal clear that this is the path you would take because you had the opportunity and the access and success.
I had, yes, but I guess the distinction is this. So the first porn movie, the Devil and Miss Jones Part 2, I thought, I'll be a still photographer on the set. That'll be interesting. I got over the fact that they were actually having sex. I did my job. I took the pictures. I did a good job. It was the second one when I was back in the makeup room, not actually doing the job. When you do stills on a set, you're given a list of what they want you to shoot, or now I know, but in the beginning, you're given a list. So you're there to shoot certain things that are to publicize the movie. What I realized on that set of Nasty Girls was that I could shoot not what I was hired to shoot, but I was going to do that, but I could also shoot really cool documentary pictures behind the scenes. Because what was a lot more exciting to me was what happened when they weren't shooting, or what was going on around the shooting. Like the porn stuff itself, it's exciting for a minute and then it just gets boring. But what goes on around it is really kind of fascinating and cool. And I got really interested in the people and who they are and what their lives are like. And I related to them in so many ways. And, people would be doing like these really intimate acts. And then if you took a step back, there's like this bored crew standing around like smoking or something, so, or you'd sense, the scene in Clute where she looks at her watch, like you were always sensing that, or, they would have to cut. They were shooting real film back then. So you'd have to cut in order to move the camera and put a new magazine in and stuff. So they would call a cut. You'd be in the middle of this really hot scene and be cut, we have to reload. And somebody go, oh, Jesus, what are we having for lunch today? Come on. And it was just, that was really what became, I think that was more what grabbed me than doing the actual stills job,
You talk about this as the golden age of porn. And for those who are not familiar with the history of porn in our culture, what period of time do you regard as the golden age of porn?
That's the early 70s into the mid 80s. It's before video, but actually it's also the period before the Reagan administration came along and before the second wave feminists came along. So it was like there was this period when there was actually artistic energy going into porn, like, because you're coming in off of the sexual revolution. People were starting to explore sex as a subject in the 70s in film, like Last Tango in Paris and In the Realm of the Senses. There were a lot of films being made that were artistic, that were exploring sex. And I think the porn industry, okay, they made dumb movies, but there was also an element of people who were artistic. And by 1980, there was some serious money going into those productions. And there were producers who felt that if you could they called it make a crossover film, porn film that would play in the general movie circuit, like regular movies. If you could make a film with a lot of sex in it that would cross over, that would be a great achievement. Like, you'd make a lot of money and it would be an artistic achievement. So there was that kind of energy coming into the business. And that's what got shut down in the 80s. And that ended the golden age of porn.
And that led you into what you describe as the BDSM world in the 90s. How did that transition come about?
Hardcore porn industry moved out to LA by the end of the 80s. They had moved out to LA, and for a lot of reasons, it was just made more sense for them to be out there. So I, of course, had job offers to move out there myself, but I hate LA. I love New York. I just didn't want to move to LA, so I stayed in New York. And then a couple of years after, let's say early 90s, the fetish porn started to catch hold. It started to bubble up out of the underground. And there had always been like these little mail order houses that made BDS. Well, it's called BDSM now, but fetish porn, they called it back then. But they were just kind of really little companies, and they started to suddenly grow because the internet was coming about. People could find the product. People were buying it. So it became a bigger industry. And I went to work for Bizarre Video, which was out in Brooklyn at the time. And I was terrified at first. I was like, oh my God, these people are going to there's going to be whips and chains and it's going to be horrible. And it wasn't. And so I worked on those fetish porn films quite a bit. And a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, Rick Savage, he was a famous porn star. He also became a director. Rick fell in love with a woman named Alan, who was into the real SM scene. And so he wanted me to meet Alan, and they came over one day and they took me to a meeting at the Eulenspiegel Society in New York. And, because, I don't know, Rick was just all excited about Alan. They were madly in love and, and he thought I'd enjoy getting to go to this SM place. So I went and we walked in the door and there was this big, gorgeous looking black woman, very imposing woman at the door. And she greeted me and she goes, Barbara Nitke, I'm so glad you could come. And I was like, wow, this is like a door opening. I thought, wow, this is a moment. And so I went in with Rick and Alan and met everybody there. And I started going to they had regular meetings. And I started going to their meetings. And I knew this was going to be my next subject. Again, I'll say I was already desensitized to the subject matter because I had worked on a couple of hundred fetish porn movies out at Bizarre Video. So, I had gotten over the fact that it could be scary, and I just understood it as another thing.
And where was your marriage, your first marriage at this point? Were you still married?
No, I left Herb in 1983. I outgrew the relationship. I mean, we were together for 13 years, which is pretty good, but I was 33 and he was, 68? Looking back, I needed to become my own person. I needed to leave. So yeah, I had left and I was on my own, making a living.
And then after that, I read you went into the fashion world. So did you decide really to to really slam the door in the face of what you had been doing in the past, in porn and BDSM? And that world, I would say, that world where you had a reputation for being a very professional and successful photographer, you had to close that door, did you, to then move into the fashion world? How did that come about?
Oh, not a bit. No. I never close any doors ever. No. No, I was...
Is that door still open then? You still step back through?
Yeah. I have lifelong friends in all of these worlds. I'm still in touch with a lot of people from the hardcore porn world. I'm still in touch with my BDSM friends. I kind of moved on creatively, but I was shooting in the BDSM scene for about 12 years, 10 or 12 years. And then I just kind of, it's like, I just evolved artistically, Chris. It wasn't like shutting a door. I was just evolving. I felt, with my sexual background, well, there was a point where I thought I kind of sexed out. Like I had shot, what was there left? Tantric sex, but that's, how do you shoot tantric sex? Because it's so it's so inward. I might figure that out one day. But I had shot everything, and so I was ready to evolve. And I thought I should go into fashion, because what is fashion if not sex anyway? And I was a disaster. I did all these great shoots I got models together, and my best friend was a model and an actress. She's amazing, Mara. And she did a lot of shoots with me, and got other fashion models together. And we borrowed clothes from Tom and Linda Platt, famous clothing designers. They're amazing. But then at the end of the day, I had this body of work, And I was talking to a photo consultant, and even Tom Platt felt the same way. And they said, but this isn't fashion. This is art. What are you doing? So I thought, oh, shit, okay. And then after that, I started a different body of work. I built a sleazy motel room set in my living room in Harlem. And I started creating little narratives, little scripts that I would shoot in my sleazy motel room. And a lot of the people who appeared in those shoots, I call it the Luke's Motel, were the crew of Project Runway, which was so much fun. I worked on that show as doing their stills for a long time, 15 years worth or so. And I would look around the set and just make up little stories about the camera operators and everybody. And then we would talk about it. We would do the shoots after work.
And you met some interesting people on those sets. I believe you know some other guests that have been on the show.
I do. Yes. And actually T, who I call Queen T, which is Teresa Vitale, I never did a shoot with her. She's going to have to come to my motel room.
I hope she's listening, T. You need to get over there.
T, you're next. I did photograph one of T's very close friends, which is Jen Morton, who was an amazing woman. Amazing. There's just nothing else to say about Jen. Extraordinary person. I had a blast shooting her. And I photographed Gretchen.
Gretchen Warthen has also been on the show.
Gretchen Warthen in an antique vintage Russian flight suit from outer space.
I'm trying to visualize this.
It's pretty cool.
This is one for the photo family album, I imagine. Yeah. That's great.
Hi, my name is Teresa Vitale, and I'm a cinematographer who was a guest on the Art Podcast. But here's what I need you to do now. You've got to download and subscribe to the new Call Time Podcast. It's about women in all departments of film and television. And it's available now on all podcast apps. And don't forget to follow at the Call Time Podcast on Instagram. I'll see you there.
I also read that you touched about this on about this earlier, Barbara. I'm going to quote this from your website, I think it is, that in 2001 you filed a lawsuit, Nitke versus Ashcroft, against the Communications Decency Act, which inhibited free speech on the internet. This is for artists, for free speech for artists. And then, in response to Project 2025, to bring us right up to date, you vowed to become part of the resistance against political moves by the religious right to control our speech and our bodies. Now, I know that you feel very passionately about these things, and it's based on a lot of personal experiences, too, and being exposed to that side of the industry for so long. Talk a little bit about that and why this is so meaningful to you now at this point in your career.
Well, it's meaningful. It's so meaningful to me now because I lived through the 80s. And, when the Reagan administration came in and I think, feminist thought has evolved over the years, thank God. But the religious right is so in bed with the Republican Party, and they're a huge voting bloc. And I just saw the damage that gets done by these people. And I'm the first one that would go out and literally fight for everyone's right to practice their own religion. And don't get an abortion if you don't want one. And don't sleep with your same sex if you don't want to. I would passionately fight for their right to their religion and their beliefs. But it drives me nuts that they want to somehow, I hate the word they, but I don't know how else to say it, that the evangelical Christian right, who are very radical, and I just feel like they want to take over the government and control, women anymore. I mean, there's even a movement now of women wanting to go back and be traditional wives. I mean, my God, my mother was one of them. Drives me nuts. Just totally drives me nuts. It drives me nuts that we return to this. You know, after all the progress, after everything, and now we came back to this.
And here we are. I want to ask you before we close about your interest in passing on your skills to next generations. You served on the faculty of the School of Visual Arts since 1992.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you enjoy that now, and how involved are you today?
Oh my God, I love teaching. I took that job in 92 because I was desperate for money, to be honest. And a friend of mine got me the job. You know, I never thought I just only did it for money, and I loved it. And I've been there ever since. The first year I taught freshmen, which I couldn't do time-wise and freelance. So I switched over to their continuing ed department. And I've been teaching continuing ed there for all these years. I love it. I love all my students. I stay in touch with them all. I love their energy. I teach different things over the years, but I love I love getting to pass on to the next generation. That's exactly it, Chris. It's like, I love photography. I love everything it has given me, and I want other people to have that too.
I read somewhere too that you said that, you know, even now, today in 2025, we haven't come to terms with the place of sex work, sexual expression, and pornography in our culture. Clearly, what you've just said actually leads to that too. In summary, Barbara, how would you like to be remembered? What's the most important things that you've done in your career and continue to do? As you say, there's still a long road ahead. You feel that you really want to leave a stamp and a legacy. Mm-hmm. What does that look like to you to have the meaning that would justify your career?
I'd like to humanize the other, which I guess in the other meaning people that are different. And my world seems to be the sex world, which I think chose me rather than I chose it, but that's okay. Yeah, I think my stamp is connecting us all and showing all of our humanity and showing that in the case of sex workers, that's important work that they do. You know, if you have a society, if you have a culture that denigrates sex, of course you're going to have sex workers. What do you think is going to be the result of that? You know, and if you have a culture that refuses to do sex education for kids, you know, where else are they going to learn about it? I mean, so without ranting about that, I think I would like to show the value that people in my world have to the culture. And I'd like to open minds, and I'd like to have people embrace people who are different and be curious about them.
And we're going to finish where we started, talking about the project that you're working on now, the new movie. Do you have a time frame for this, Barbara? And a working title?
Yeah, well, it's called American Ecstasy. I would really, really would love to shoot it next summer. I hope that can happen. And it's the movie's about, it follows the life of a young woman who has had a traumatic past, very traumatic past. But she actually finds that she's healing and empowering herself by working as a porn star. And the film, kind of the theme underlying it is that it really explores the horror that sexual shaming causes to everyone. And it's also about the value of found family, which, you know, a lot of people end up with found families. You know, we create our own families. So, so that's what the film's about. And, I hope I could shoot it next summer. Boy, would that be great.
Well, the very best of luck, Barbara. That sounds like a fun project and a very satisfying one, I think. But by the time you've wrapped that, you'll feel a certain sense of achievement there because it means so much to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good luck with it. And thank you for taking time to come on the podcast and share your very, very interesting story. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you. And I hope you have too.
Chris, you're amazing. You're so easy to talk to. I've been a nervous wreck, but you have made it fun. And thank you. I really appreciate this.
Join us now over on YouTube now, because we are going to continue our conversation over there. But for now, that's our podcast for this week. And again, my thanks to Barbara Nitke. We really enjoyed this episode, Barbara, and I can't wait for us to continue our conversation over on YouTube. So let's hop over there.
Okay, great.
And while you're here, don't forget to slide down the show notes where you'll find a link to Barbara's website, her IMDb profile, and social media. You'll also find a link to our social media and our email address. So there's lots of ways that you can reach us here at the Art Podcast, and send any suggestions for guests too. We'd love to hear from you. And of course, we would love it if you would not only subscribe and download these podcasts, but also share with a friend. And if you get a moment, leave us a 5-star rating and review, because that makes us more visible amongst the thousands and thousands of podcasts out there. And of course, if you're interested in the film and TV industry, don't forget to check out our new podcast, Cool Time, where you'll find women from all departments. That's Cool Time on any podcast app. Meanwhile, my thanks again to my guest this week, Barbara Nitke, and to you for listening. I'll be back in 2 weeks' time with another guest from the world of visual arts. So I do hope you'll join me then.